theyeshiva.net.
Let's begin, Chevra. Masechta Megillah, Daf Tazayin, Amud Beis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 lines from the top. The line starts, Malchus, Tcheles, V'goymer. In the previous shir, which was last Friday, today is Monday morning, Hey Nissan Tavshin Pei, March 30th, 2020, Parshas Tzav, the 5th of Nissan, 5780, March 30, 2020, 2020. Welcome, everybody. In our previous class, which was on Friday, we learned the idea that the Gemarah says that Binyamin was given 5 changes of clothing by his brother Yosef before he was sent back to the Holy Land to relocate, where the rest of the brothers only received 1 change of clothing. The Gemarah says, why would he want to trigger such jealousy yet again in the family? The Gemarah says, no, it was an intimation that one day Binyamin's descendant, Mordechai, will come out from Shushan, from the palace of the king, dressed up in 5 unique royal garments. Mordechai yatsa milifnei hamelech belevush malchus, and the Megillah lists 5 types of garments which Mordechai will emerge in. I do want to point out what somebody mentioned, and that is, if you look in the Chumash of Parshas Vayigash, there's just a very interesting comment, and that is that when Yosef gives his brothers, it says chalifos, a change of clothing. So it says chalifos with a vav, ches lamet fei vav saf. By Binyamin it says he gives them chamesh chalifos, a change of 5, but the word chalifos is without a vav. So the Vilna Gaon explains, because they were of the same value. So that's why they have a vav and his doesn't have a vav, to show that his 5, even though it was more in quantity, but in terms of value it was the same, and therefore didn't create jealousies. So why did he give 5? He gave 5 only because to intimate about Mordechai. That's what the Vilna Gaon says. We gave different interpretations, but I want to just tell you something else. There's a Rashi that says in Parshas Kisisa, it says luchas. Hashem gave Moshe the luchas, the tablets. So it says luchas without a vav. So Rashi says, why say without a vav? Luchas, to teach you that it was like one, because they were both identical. Usually when you have 2 tablets of stone, they have to be cut out. So they can't be mamish identical. There has to be some nuance different, because no person, even a very skilled mason, is going to ultimately create some type of subtle difference between one tablet of stone and another tablet of stone when it's done by hand. But Hashem made the 2 tablets that it was like one. In other words, they were mamish identical. Shtei and Shabbos. That's why it says luchas without a vav. So I saw a vart in the name of Reb Chaim Berlin. Reb Chaim Berlin was one of the children of the Netziv. The Netziv was the Rosh Hashiva of Volozhin, Reb Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, and they had a son. I think it was a son, Reb Chaim Berlin. He was a rabbi in Moscow. So I saw a vart in his name, very, very nice, and he said that by the Shvatim it says chalifos with a vav, and by Binyamin it says chalifos without a vav. Why? Because the Shvatim, obviously, you can't have all the brothers exactly the same height and the same size and measurement. So there had to be different types of clothing that he had prepared for each of the brothers. But Binyamin, they were all identical, the same size, because it was all for Binyamin. So by Binyamin it says chalifos without a vav, because as Rashi says, by luchas, when it says without a vav, it means it's like one in the sense that they're all identical. But by the brothers it says with a vav, because none of them were identical, because they had to be different sizes so they could fit and suit the physique and the body of each one of the brothers. Now the Gemarah continues the next piece. What happens when Yosef reveals himself to his brothers? It's a very, very emotional reunion. And the pasuk says, "Vayipol al tzavre Binyamin achiv." Yosef fell on the neck of Binyamin, his brother. Vayef, and he wept. Or Binyamin bocha al tzavarav. And then it says, Binyamin cried on his neck. So the Gemarah says, Vayipol al tzavare Binyamin achiv. It says that he fell on the neck of Binyamin, his brother. There's something strange. Tzavar is neck. Tzavare is plural, necks. How many necks did Binyamin have? Obviously, he only had one neck. So it says, Vayipol al tzavore Binyamin, it should have said, al tzavar Binyamin, on one neck. Binyamin didn't have many necks. So why does it say, Vayipol al tzavore Binyamin achiv? That's the question. Amar Rabbi Elazar said, Bachal Shnei Mikdashim. There is a hint over here that Yosef cried on the necks of Binyamin, not on one neck, on two necks, because he cried about two Batei Mikdash, Shnei Mikdashim, two holy temples, the first Beis Hamikdash and the second Beis Hamikdash, Shasidim Liyas Bechelka Shel Binyamin, which are destined to be in the territory of Binyamin, Vasidim Lecharev, and they're both going to be destroyed. Binyamin's territory in Eretz Yisrael included the Beis Hamikdash, the first Beis Hamikdash and the second Beis Hamikdash. When Yosef met Binyamin and he revealed himself to Binyamin, he wasn't only crying for their reunion right then. He was also weeping for the future, observing that in Binyamin's territory there's going to be both Batei Mikdash, the first temple and the second one, and they will both be destroyed. And that's the hint why the pasuk says he cried not on Binyamin's neck, but on Binyamin's necks. And conversely, Binyamin bachal tzavarav. Binyamin wept on Yosef's neck. Tzavarav. It doesn't say tzavarei. It says tzavarav, his neck. Bachal mishkan shiloi shasad liyas bechelka shel Yosef asad lecharev. Binyamin wept about something else. In Yosef's territory was built the Mishkan of Shiloh. Shiloh was a city in Eretz Yisrael, which was in the territory that was given to Yosef. The Mishkan of Shiloh stood for 369 years. When the Jewish people came into Eretz Yisrael, in the times of Yeshua, so they had the Mishkan in a place called Gilgal for a number of years, and then it moved to Shiloh where it stood for 369 years. Then it was destroyed in the days of Eli, and then the Mishkan went through another two places. It was in a place called Noiv, a place called Givon for 57 years. And then ultimately the Beis HaMikdash was built in Jerusalem. Shiloh was in Yosef's territory, and Shiloh's Mishkan would also be destroyed. So Binyamin is crying for the destruction of Mishkan Shiloh by the Philistines. That's what the Gemarah says. So this is not just that weeping in a reunion, they're also weeping for the future. Now the obvious question you have to ask is two things, actually a few things. Why are they crying now about the Churban Beis HaMikdash? Why is that relevant now? The two brothers met. They haven't been together for 22 years. Yosef tells his brothers, I am Yosef, is my brother alive. He falls on Binyamin's necks and he cries. Binyamin falls on his neck and he weeps. Beautiful, emotional, special. Why do the Chazal say no? Yosef was weeping for two Batei Mikdash, and Binyamin was weeping for the Mishkan of Shiloh. True, it says Tzavarav. Tzavarav is plural. But what is the meaning of this story? How are we to understand it? Why are they now discussing the future history that will only occur hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years later? Remember, this is Yosef in Egypt. The Jews are still going to be in Egypt for 210 years, and then they're going to be 40 years in the desert. And then the Mishkan Shiloh is going to be built much later. So you're dealing with things that are hundreds of years later. They're not happening the next year or the next decade, even the next century. Yet they're crying now about the Beis HaMikdash. Number two, the way it's intimated is the neck. They cried on each other's necks. He cried on the necks of Binyamin and on the neck of Yosef. Why is the neck the symbol of the Beis HaMikdash? The neck. Number three, Yosef is crying for Binyamin's Beis HaMikdash, and Binyamin is crying for Yosef's Mishkan. The Beis HaMikdash was in the territory of Binyamin, Yosef is crying. The Shiloh was in the territory of Yosef, and Binyamin is crying for that. So I'm crying for your destruction, for the destruction of your edifice, and you're crying for the destruction of my edifice. Yosef is crying on the necks of Binyamin because the Beis HaMikdash, the first one and the second one, and Binyamin is crying for the Mishkan in the territory of Yosef. Shouldn't Yosef first and foremost be crying for his own Mishkan? And Binyamin should be crying for his own, also for Yosef, but his own. No. They each cry for the other one. They each cry for the other one. So this is a very, very interesting Gemarah. How are we supposed to understand this? I'm going to share with you today one interpretation about this so we could understand the deeper meaning of what's going on here. The Beis HaMikdash is obviously here, the parable for the neck is the parable for the Beis HaMikdash. In fact, there's a pasuk in Shir Hashirim, K'migdal David Savarech, your neck is like Migdal David, it's like the tower of King David. This is a verse in the Song of Songs, chapter 4, verse 4, Shir Hashirim Perek Dalet pasuk Dalet, and the Medrash says this refers to the Beis HaMikdash. Why does it refer to the Beis HaMikdash? So based on the Medrash, the idea is that the neck is always in the higher part of the human body, and it represents the glory and the beauty of the person, and the Beis HaMikdash is in the height of Eretz Yisrael, and it's the glory of Eretz Yisrael and the glory of the Jewish people. That's what the Marsha explains. And the Medrash says that just like the neck is in the height of the human body, the Beis HaMikdash is in the height of the world. But it's not the head. It should be called the head. The head is the top of the body. It's not the head. It's the neck. And the Gemarah says that in fact, the Beis HaMikdash, it says about the Beis HaMikdash, Ovein Kseif of Shachin. It dwelled between the shoulders like the neck. In fact, there was a well in Yerushalayim that was even higher than the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash was lower than the well. It was called the Eitam wellspring. The Beis HaMikdash was lower, 23 amas from that well, just like the neck, because the neck is not all the way on the top. The neck, rather, is a little lower from the head. And the Gemarah says in the Masechtas Zvachim, that's why it says Beis HaMikdash dwells between the shoulders, because the most beautiful part of the ox is Kseifav, its shoulders, which is of course lower than the head. So it's up, it's elevated, but it's not all the way on the top. It's not the neck, it's not the head, it's the neck. But what is the meaning of this? If the point of the Beis HaMikdash is that it's the most elevated space in the world, why would you compare it to the head? Why the neck? If the elevation is insignificant, why is it then compared to the neck? What is the idea over here? The idea here is very profound. The brain is the seat of the soul. The brain is the seat of energy. The brain has, of course, the central nervous system, and everything that happens in the body always begins within that little jelly matter in our brain, which is just a few inches, and in our skull, which we call the mayach, the brain. And that basically is responsible for every single experience that happens in the entire human organism. What is the neck? The neck represents the intermediary, the bridge between the head, between the brain and the body. Because the only way that the brain could communicate to the body is through. You have the food pipe, you have the ear pipe, the windpipe, the esophagus, the trachea, and you have all the veins, you have the nervous system, and you have all of the arteries that ultimately connect the brain to the rest of the body through the neck. So all the limbs and the organs receive their vitality from the brain. Each of them is governed in its behavior and in its reactions, both conscious and unconscious, through the brain, but it happens through the intermediary of the neck. And that is what we call the kone, the windpipe, the vesha, the food pipe, and the vridin, shebegarin, all of the various limbs and organs and arteries that ultimately connect the brain to the stem of the brain, which then continues through the neck and communicates with the body. This means the brain on its own is unbelievable, but the neck represents the connection of the brain to the entire organism. And that's why the Beis HaMikdash is called the neck, it's not called the head. You know, you'll say about sometimes a person, he's a brainy fellow, right? He's in his brain, he's brilliant, but tachlis, he can't get his life together. We know some people, they're brilliant, they know everything, but they know nothing. What did somebody once say? There are people who know the price of everything and the value of nothing. You have people, they're brilliant, they have all the information in the world, but they don't know how to communicate it to others, they don't know how to communicate it to themselves. You have people, they are geniuses in their brain, but you know what's missing? They don't have the neck. They don't have the neck that turns the brain, turns the head where it has to, and becomes the bridge that your enlightened brain should be able to inform and inspire and illuminate every other part of your organism, so that your whole life is transformed by your knowledge. Knowledge on its own is irrelevant. It's inconsequential. It doesn't have an impact. Sometimes it can just be used for destructiveness. The Gemarah says in Maseches Yuma that a person could learn Torah, and if he doesn't merit, nasis loy sam hamavis. For him, the Torah becomes poison. How can you say that? How can the Gemarah say that? The answer is because the Torah can be misused. It can be misused. You can take great information, but you don't know how to apply it in the right way. You don't know how to apply it to yourself. So therefore, the brain on its own is great, but it could be beheaded, God forbid, physically, and it's worthless, or emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. There's an expression in English: nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. You got that? Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. That's why the Beis Hamikdash is not compared to the brain. The Beis Hamikdash is compared to the neck, because the purpose of the Beis Hamikdash was not to remain up there in the clouds, to be the brain of the world, but to be the neck of the world. It had to be a little lower, as the Gemarah says, Nachasi Beipurta, in order to bring it, to bring the light, the awareness into the whole world. Just like by a person, your own Beis Hamikdash. It's not enough that your neshama, your godly soul, is in your brain. You need to be able to become a wholesome person. Every part of you becomes informed by that, and therefore, when the Torah says Ben Yosef cried on the necks of Binyamin, and Binyamin cried on the neck of Yosef, the Gemarah says, what is it referring to? It's referring to the Beis Hamikdash. That's where the main avodah of the person is, in the neck, both in the Beis Hamikdash, the physical one, and in the spiritual one. And that's why the weeping of the destruction is the neck, not the head. The head, the soul itself, always remains holy, but it's the communication that's missing. And the purpose is not to remain in the head, but to bring it down into the rest of the body. Now, why does Yosef cry for Binyamin and Binyamin cries for Yosef? Okay. The answer to this is very interesting. Whenever you cry, and I think all of us, if you ever cried, you know this. Whenever you cry, it makes things easier, right? It's a release. If there's a difficult situation, like a situation we're in today, people cry, and it's a release. The fact is that when something is bothering you and it's stressful and it's overwhelming, I start crying. Whether it's publicly or privately, but I start crying. Now, the crying doesn't fix anything. Crying doesn't fix anything, but I feel better. There's like an outlet for my pain and my agony and my distress. It feels better. There's a pasuk in Tehillim. Haisali dimasi lechem yomim v'layla. My tears were a substitute for bread. It's like when you eat, you feel better. Sometimes when you cry, you don't have to eat. Your tears are your bread. You ever noticed it? Because you're satiated. This means something very special, okay? And this insight that I'm going to share with you, we heard once from the Lubavitcher Rebbe when he discussed this Gemarah, Parshas Vayigash, this story, and he said as follows. When you have the power to do something, crying becomes dangerous. Because it can distract you from your mission. And your mission is go and fix the situation. I'll give an example. Let's say Chalila. In normal times, these are very difficult times. Normal times. They're not letting anybody, one of the big side tragedies, but a big one is that the people being admitted to the hospital, nobody could come with them. They're alone. People are dying alone. Nobody to hold their hand, nobody to be with them. Because they're frightened of hospitals, obviously, being infected by the coronavirus. Chas v'sholom, it could wipe out a hospital. So that's why they don't let anybody come in with the patient. Only the health professionals, the doctors, the nurses there. So this is a very, very difficult situation. But imagine a situation, a mother's child, Chalila Rachman al-Islam, falls ill. And the illness is difficult. And what does the mother do? The mother sits on the couch from morning to night and cries. There's something wrong about this. What's wrong? Why are you crying? Let's do something about it. Imagine American soldiers storming Normandy, June 1944, storming Normandy. They want to once and for all defeat Hitler. And then they see the barrage of bombs and shootings and their soldiers are dead all over the place. And the soldiers sit down and start crying by the beach. It's the worst thing. Don't cry. Fight. Get in. There's still a lot of us alive. When this is over and you have a quiet time, now you'll sit down and you'll cry. You'll cry. You'll release your trauma and your pain and your suffering for all your friends who have been killed in casualty. When the mother or the father tried to do everything to save this child, after everything is done and they knew they did everything, now they're going to sit down and cry. But when you're in the middle of the war, there's no time to cry. A Hatzalah member, I spoke to Hatzalah members last night. We had a Zoom evening with the Hatzalah of Rockland County. Yeah, so they were sharing with me some experiences, what's going on. Very, very difficult stuff. It's not an easy time now, and they are heroes. They're in the front lines of fire. So imagine Hatzalah member, he's describing to me what happened, the whole story, and I would ask him, why didn't you start crying? No. If you're sitting in your home and you read a story, you can start crying. There's nothing for you to do. So you're in pain, so you have a release for your pain. But if you're in the front lines of duty, you're not allowed to cry. Crying is amazing in the right time. But when you could do something about it, crying can only make it worse. Why can crying make it worse? Because you could even feel, oh, I'm good. Things are better. When really there's so much to do. This is the meaning of this story. When I see my friend's Beis HaMikdash destroyed, my job is feel empathy and cry. But who could fix my friend's Beis HaMikdash? Not me. Only my friend. I have to help him. I have to speak to him, empower him, encourage him. I have to daven for him, ask rachamim for him. But who could fix your Beis HaMikdash? Who can fix your broken life? I can't. I could fix mine. I can't fix yours. After I did everything I could to help you, and I see your life is still destroyed, now if I'm a friend, I'm going to sit down and cry. But when it comes to my Beis HaMikdash, was weinst du? Don't cry, and don't weep, and don't sob, and don't moan, and don't groan. Go build it. Go build your Beis HaMikdash. Go do what you have to do. Sometimes by crying, I'm like, oh, I already just fulfilled my obligation. That's why Yosef cries for Binyamin's Beis HaMikdash. And Binyamin cries for Yosef's Mishkan. Yaakov Avinu, the Zohar says, he didn't cry for either. He was saying Shema. Why? Because Yaakov is the father of both of them. It's his. So Yaakov was busy fixing the situation by giving the Jewish people the gift of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, which is the essence of the Beis HaMikdash, which is a place of karbonos, which the idea of karbonos is to come close to the oneness of Hashem. So this is the idea that at this special moment, they cried on the necks, and each one cried for the other. The last question is, why now? Why did they have to bring in this situation now? So I saw a beautiful vart that they bring in one of the Mefarshim of Masechta Megillah, and the answer is that the sin of the sale of Yosef came because of jealousy, because the brothers couldn't get along with each other. And the Churban Beis HaMikdash always came for the same reason, strife. Whenever there's strife among Jews, there's no good things that come out of it. The first exile came because the brothers hated Yosef. The next exile, the first Churban of the first Beis HaMikdash happened because the Jewish people were weakened, because the split after the death of Shlomo HaMelech. There were two kingdoms, the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom, and it weakened the nation, and ultimately 10 of the tribes were exiled. There were 2 left, and they were also exiled. The second Beis HaMikdash, the Gemarah says in Masechta Yuma, came because of internal strife, and therefore there could be no way of negotiating with the Romans and coming to an agreement. They burnt everything in Jerusalem, and they forced the Jews to go to a war that was hopeless, a famous Masechta Gittin, the whole story about the zealots of Jerusalem. Once again, it was internal hatred and strife that caused every single time that there was Jewish exile. When Jews are united, we are a fortress, an invincible fortress. The moment we start killing each other and hating each other and disrespecting each other and mistrusting each other, it's like in a marriage. There's cracks everywhere. When there's cracks, now the invaders could come in. How does a virus happen? The virus has to get through the fortresses of the cells. And when that happens, infections spread. As long as there's unity, there's a very, very powerful fortress. So therefore, at this moment, when Yosef met Binyamin and the brothers came together, Yosef and Binyamin were not only thinking about today, they were thinking about the future. And they understood the main thing that we have to repair is, can we really become a family that is functional and a nation that is united, even if we don't agree about everything, but we have to be able to love each other, respect each other, and rely on each other and trust each other. Families don't have to agree about everything. If you're a Jewish family, that's not going to happen. But you have to be able to trust each other. Spouses don't have to agree about everything. Jewish couples don't agree on everything. But you have to be able to give people the benefit of the doubt. You have to be able to trust them. You have to be able to rely on them. You have to be able to feel, I have to feel, even if you don't agree with me, you still love me. And even if you don't agree with me, I could still communicate with you. You could communicate with me. You don't denigrate me. You don't think I'm a piece of garbage. That's the key issue. And that's why they were crying now to see that the strife among the Jewish people has not been healed yet. And it may come out in history again and again in the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash and the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. And that's why they're crying. They want to fix it. And part of fixing it is that you care about the other person. So the Majitzer Rebbe says, the Divrei Yisrael says a beautiful word. How do you know you care about another person? That I could cry about your life as much as I can cry about mine. And sometimes a real friend can cry about somebody else's life more than he cries about his own. And he says that's why Yosef was crying for Binyamin and Binyamin was crying for Yosef. Because from their true love towards each other, they were feeling the other person's pain, and this itself was the tikkun, it was the fixing of the hate that would bring the churban. They were trying to prevent the churban by showing real love to the other person. That is an insight by the Divrei Yisrael of Majitz. Says the Gemarah Weiter. So this is a little piece of Gemarah here about Yosef and Binyamin, but it has a profound idea. Let me look if there's questions. 845-777-4747. Says the Gemarah, when Yosef revealed himself to his brothers, he says, your eyes see and the eyes of my brother Binyamin see. And what Yosef is basically telling them is, you all see that it's me, my mouth, who is communicating to you. Why does he have to differentiate between them? He could say, all of you see that I'm speaking to you. My mouth is speaking to you. Why does he have to differentiate and set apart Binyamin? The answer is, Amar Rebbe Elazar, Amar Lahem, he said, Kashem shein belibi al Binyamin achi shlahaya b'mechirasi, kachein belibi aleichem. Just as I have no resentment in my heart towards Binyamin, my brother, because he was not present when I was sold, I also don't carry around resentment towards you. So he says, your eyes see that I'm speaking to you, and the eyes of my brother Binyamin see that I'm speaking to you. Why does he set Binyamin apart? Because he's trying to create an equation, a juxtaposition. And he's saying, just like you all understand, I'm not upset at Binyamin. I don't want to take revenge against Binyamin. He's my baby brother. He was not part of this whole sale. That's the same way I'm feeling about you, which was an incredible idea, that after everything the brothers did to Yosef, he remained so wholesome and so pure and so confident that he was not carrying around this anger and grudges and hatred and animosity and desire for revenge towards his brothers. It's an incredible moment in history where there could be forgiveness, even though they made such a tragic mistake. So he's telling them, look at me, you see me, and Binyamin sees me. And I want you to know that I know the difference. Binyamin sees me revealing himself to him, and he knows that I'm not carrying a grudge against him. And I want you to understand that that's where I am as well. How can Yosef do this? This is the incredible ability of Yosef to really look at his life and say, I'm not a victim. I was never a victim. I was sent into this situation. So even though my brothers really did not want to benefit me, they wanted to hurt me. And what they did was absolutely abusive and absolutely painful and horrifying. He was separated from his family and from his father for 22 long years. Nonetheless, Yosef can actually come to a place where he has no anger, where he's not carrying this terrible, terrible resentment, where there is forgiveness, where there is reconciliation. And it only comes because of his inner wholesomeness, where he is at peace with his own life, knowing that God sent him here, and therefore he's not a victim. It's an incredible, incredible idea that the Gemarah is telling us. In fact, I once saw the Yisroel Chaim says, in Parshas Vayigash, when Yosef says, I am Yosef, he says right afterwards, I am Yosef, is my brother alive? And he tells the brothers to come closer, and he says, Ani Yosef achichem asher mechartem oisem Mitzrayim. I am Yosef, your brother, the one who you sold to Egypt. So Yisroel Chaim says, why does he have to add that? They didn't know that they sold him to Egypt? Did he think they didn't know how he got there? They were the ones who sold him. So the Yisroel Chaim says, what he meant was, I am Yosef, your brother, even when you sent me to Egypt. Even when you sold me as a slave to the Egyptians, I remained your brother. I still remain your brother. And I saw that one of the tzaddikim said that for the Yisroel Chaim to say this, he himself had to be on that level. And that's why Yosef says Asher. The word Asher, the Sfas Emes says, comes from the word Osher, which means fortune. Like Asher Shibarta, Yasher Koichach Asher Shibarta. Yosef actually even felt grateful, because he knew that only because of what his brothers did, even though their intentions were horrible, that he become the prime minister of Egypt and he could save the whole world from hunger. So in your own life, even people who meant to harm you, ultimately, God allowed them to do it in order to bring you to the places you're supposed to be. And when you could look at your life from that perspective, you could live in a much more wholesome place and in a much more forgiving place. Guys, are you capable of doing that? Are you guys capable of doing that? Looking at the people who really, let's put it this way, they did not behave nicely. Maybe they themselves were traumatized. Usually, they themselves are traumatized. Be able to look at my life and say, they did what they did. For whatever reason they did it, and maybe horrible, horrible intentions. But God sent me here. I was on a mission. It happened through this. And I am going to reach my full potential only in this situation. It's an incredible idea that Yosef taught the world the first time. And the Jews could not become a nation without developing this attitude. Where there's no forgiveness, there's no national identity. Where there's no forgiveness, there's no future. Where there's no forgiveness, we remain stuck in the past. I really hope that one of the things that will come out of this whole madness is a new consciousness among humanity and a new consciousness among the Jewish people. Woe unto us if this cursed coronavirus, when it finally leaves, but when it finally gets under control, if it cannot create within us a new consciousness, that will be like one of the saddest things of history. You understand what I'm saying? If this does not have the power to transform us as individuals and as communities and as the Jewish people and ultimately the world, which is really what Geula is about, transformation of consciousness, woe unto us. It's like, what else has to happen? Everything closed down. What else? What else? If this can't, liberate me from my toxicity and resentments and getting stuck in my own ego, and every one of us in our own stuff, So that's Yosef teaches us the ability to create such paradigm shifts. Sagt the Gemarah weiter. Kifi hamedaber aleichem. Yosef says, you see, it's my mouth speaking to you. What does this mean? Obviously, it's my mouth speaking to you. It's like, I'll tell you, can you see it's my mouth speaking to you? Yeah. Yosef was saying to them, Kifi kein libi. Kifi hamedaber doesn't only mean it's my mouth. It's kipi. My mouth is like something else, meaning my mouth and my heart are matching each other. Very often, There's echad bepev, echad belev. I say one thing and I mean one thing. I mean one thing, the other thing. I'm nice to you, I'm gracious, I'm inviting, I'm loving, but deep down in my heart, I wish you were dead. Yosef says, kifi kain libi. My mouth is just a reflection of my heart. This is genuine. When I tell you that I'm looking at you like I look at Binyamin, I'm not carrying around this resentment, it's a reflection of my heart. What I tell you is what I mean. That's what he means, kifi amadaber alech. What happens now? He sends them back to the land. He wants them to bring their father and their whole family. And the pasuk says, "Ula aviv shalach kazois." He sent his father something. What did he send? 10 donkeys carrying the best of Mitzrayim. And then it says he sent another 10 female donkeys carrying grain and bread and food so his father would have during his journey down to Egypt. And the question is, if he already sent 10 donkeys filled with food, what else did he send with the 10 donkeys of Tuv Mitzrayim, of the goodness of Egypt? Mituv Mitzrayim, it doesn't say what. Was it food, grain, fruits, vegetables? That the pasuk says later he sent. So what's this Tuv Mitzrayim? Amar Binyamin bar Yefes, Amar Belazar, Sholach lo yayin yoshan shadas keinem noichei. Yosef sent his father aged wine, old wine, knowing that the mind of the elderly finds comfort and pleasure from aged wine. That's why he sent this wine. So Tuv Mitzrayim, the best of Egypt, represents Yayin Yashan, aged wine, because he knew this will be especially appealing to his father. And this was the best thing he could send his elderly father, because Yaakov at this point was quite an elderly man. There would still be 17 years to his life. But at this age, this time he was already around 130 years old. So this is Das Keinem Noichei Menu. The Marsha says that the older people get, the more cold they get, and therefore they like this type of wine in order to warm up their bodies. That's what the Marsha says. I saw another interpretation, another very interesting interpretation. Why Das Keinem? Why do elderly people like this type of wine? So I saw that one of the commentators says something very beautiful, and that is, usually in the world, drinks and foods, the older they get, the worse they get, right? If you keep bread around for too long, it's going to get moldy, you're not going to eat it. The same is true with fruits, and the same is true with vegetables. When things get older, they dry up, they decompose, etc., etc. They certainly don't get better. There's one exception, and what is that? Yayin Yashan. Yayin, wine, the wine is 10 years old, 20 years old, 100-year-old wine, yayin yasha. I was at a Malava Malka some time ago, and they auctioned off a bottle of wine for $25,000. It was a few hundred years old. Wow, $25,000, and somebody actually paid for it. This was a Malava Malka. There was a Malava Malka in Brooklyn. Somebody paid $25,000 for this yayin yashan. The only thing, with age, it becomes better and better and better. The Mishnah says that there's two types of older people. Ziknei Ha'aretz and Ziknei Talmidei Chachamim. Ziknei Ha'aretz, people who dedicated their life to ignorance. The older they get, the more confused they get. Daitum mitarefes. Ziknei Talmidei Chachamim, elderly people who were dedicated to truth and wisdom. The older they get, their das becomes sharper and better and more settled and more calm and more perceptive. So Yosef was sending yayin yashan, aged wine, shadas keinem noichei menu. He knew that his father is a zaken who gets this wine. The older it gets, the better it gets, intimating that his father should not be concerned. He's older in age and life seems to be waning. On the contrary, the older you get, the mind becomes more powerful, more acute, just like wine. This was a special gift of respect and graciousness that Yosef sent to Yaakov Avinu. I saw also another interpretation of the Avnei Nezer, Rabbi Avram of Sachachav, and he says that the older wine gets, the better it gets, because wine has what's called shmarim. It has haven, like, the black pieces, the sediments. And the older it gets, the more separated it becomes even from the most subtle sediments, and the wine becomes more clear and more clear. And he says the same is true with a zaken. The older a person gets, a real person, the more refined you become, because every day of life you separate more sediments, more dirt, more filth, more toxicity, and you become more clear, more sparkling, more radiant, more refined, more pure. And that's why Yayin Yashon, older, aging wine, is connected to Skanim, to elderly people who manage to completely refine themselves. And every day they grow in this level of refinement, just like wine that becomes older. And he says that's why Yosef sent his father Yayin Yashon, because Yaakov is truth. And it says that Yaakov's entire family, Mitasoi Shlema, there was no dirt in his family. It's not like Avram and Yitzchak, there was Esav and Yishmael. By Yaakov, all of the children were pure. In other words, Yaakov was completely refined. So that's why he, from all the patriarchs, gets the Yayin Yashon. I saw another interpretation. This interpretation actually comes from the Rabbi. He once said another beautiful, beautiful insight, that Yosef sent this to Yaakov to send him a message. What was the message? Really very, very beautiful idea. We learned Friday that the Pasuk says that when the Shvatim came down to Egypt with Binyamin, they had a feast with Yosef. And Yosef gave them a lot of gifts, and he also gave them wine. And it says, Vayishtu vayishkiru imai. They drank and they became inebriated. And Rashi says that the reason the Pasuk is telling us this detail is because none of them have had a drink of wine for 22 years. From the day that the brothers sold Yosef, they did not have a drink of wine. And Yosef himself did not have a drink of wine. In other words, they both recognized that it's a time of grief. It's a time of mourning. And none of them drank for 22 years. And this was the first time when they were united, even though they didn't know it's Yosef yet. This is before he revealed that they both drank wine. So I spoke on Friday why Yosef drank wine. It was a preparation for Purim, and Purim you drink, and therefore Yosef was drinking. Al pi remez, at least a homiletical interpretation. But let's now think about this. If Yosef didn't drink and the brothers didn't drink, certainly Yaakov did not drink, because he was mourning more than everybody. The Pasuk says that he told his sons that I will go down to my grave in grief, and vayimayim leisnachim, he refused to be comforted. So if Yosef wasn't drinking and the brothers weren't drinking, certainly their father, who felt the most acute pain for this separation between him and Yosef, thinking that Yosef was devoured by a wild animal, certainly he was not drinking. He was not drinking all these years. So when Yosef sends him wine, Yosef is giving him a message that my father, we could say l'chaim now, it's time to drink, but much more than that. He sends him yayin yashan, aged wine. It doesn't only mean he went to some wine connoisseur in Egypt and he gave him a nice sum of money and he bought the aged wine. It means that Yosef himself, at the first opportunity, had this wine aged. Yosef himself made the wine and he had the wine aged. Why? Because he knew and he hoped and he had anticipation that one day I will still be reunited with my father and my family, and he will be able to drink the wine. So that's why this wine was aged. This wine was aged already decades earlier. Yosef was sending this wine to his father, telling him, I never forgot you. And I never for a moment lost hope that we're going to be reunited. And this itself was the greatest comfort that Yaakov could get from this aged wine, that Yosef still remained connected, even in the depth of the abyss. And I guess it's really a metaphor for all of Jewish history, that despite our estrangement, the Jewish people have the wine. The Gemarah says that one of the meals when Mashiach comes is going to be the Leviasan and the Shor Habar and Yayin HaMeshumar, aged wine that is still protected in the grapes from Sheshes Yimei Bereshis. It's the aged wine in anticipation for the reunion. Zog the Gemarah weiter. What happens next is Yosef settles his brothers and they live in Egypt, and then Yaakov Avinu passes away. And when Yaakov Avinu passes away, they bury him, and now the brothers are afraid. Ooh, now is going to be revenge time. Doomsday, the day of reckoning. Yosef will finally take revenge because Tati is gone. He didn't want to do it by Tati's life, during Tati's lifetime, but now is the day of reckoning. So the pasuk says, "Vayelchu gam echa vayiplu lefonav." His brothers went and they fell before him. They bowed before him, begging him and saying, "Please forgive us, and we will be your slaves, but don't punish us for what we have done." Yosef starts crying and he says, "I know you tried to harm me, but God brought such a happy ending to this. I'm not instead of God. I'm not going to punish you." This is the folk saying, like the expression of people. Even a fox in its time, bow down to it. Meaning, this is a very interesting expression. The fox is not considered the king of the animals, but every animal has its day. Every clown has his day. The fox also has his day. And in his day, when he's the king, bow down to him. In other words, it may pass, and in a week from now, the lion will put the fox in its place. But right now, the tala, the fox, be'idne, when he's shining, when he's riding high, sagidle, bow down your head. You don't have to protest and say, you're just a sly, shrewd fox. I'm not bowing down to you. This is an expression. The Yosefs Chachamim says that there was a tradition that the fox reigns 1 month of the year. And in that month, everybody bows down to him, just like the rest of the year, they bow down to the lion who's considered the king of the jungle. Frag the Gemarah, please. This doesn't make sense. You're telling me that the brothers fell down and prostrated themselves before Yosef, because when the fox is running high, when the fox is riding high, bow down to him. Tala? Why is Yosef considered a fox? Why is he inferior to his brothers? I don't understand this. They bow down to him. So you have to call him a fox and say, really he's a fox. They shouldn't bow down to him. Why should they? But because he's on top, he's the king of Egypt, therefore they have to bow down to him. Why would we say this? Why is he any less than his brother that you're calling him a fox? This tradition was misconstrued. It says, "Vayishtachu Yisroel Chaim." When Yaakov fell ill, he asked Yosef to come visit him, and he asked him to bury him in the land of Israel. And that's when it says, Yisroel bowed down to Yosef on the top of the bed. When a fox is ruling, you should bow down to him. This is about Yaakov. Yaakov doesn't belong bowing down to his son. A son could bow to his father. A father like Yaakov shouldn't bow down to Yosef. The answer is because Yosef was the king of Egypt, so therefore it was appropriate for Yaakov to prostrate himself to Yosef, even though relative to Yaakov, Yosef is a son. So in that sense, we're calling him the fox. Nonetheless, Yaakov is bowing down to him. Now, what would be the point of the Chazal to say this? What would be the point? And the answer, of course, is that Yaakov wanted to empower Yosef. Yaakov was asking Yosef to bury him in the land of Israel, in Canaan. He knew it's not going to be easy. That's why he asked him to make an oath. Why do you have to make an oath? Your father asked you. He said, I'll do it. He said, swear. Because he knew it's going to be difficult. Paro would not be happy. The Egyptians would not be happy. They wanted everything to be in Egypt. They didn't want that Yaakov, the patriarch, should be buried in Canaan. Yaakov knew this is going to be difficult. That's why he made Yosef swear. And in fact, Paro only agreed because Yosef made an oath. He wouldn't have agreed that for Yosef to come. So Yaakov bowed down to him. Why do we bow down but to the fox when he's the king? Because we're acknowledging that he's the king. Yaakov, this is very powerful. Yaakov had to empower Yosef. Remember, Yosef, you're a king. You're a king. You're not a victim. You're not subservient. You have the power of liberty. If you want to bury me in the land of Canaan, you'll be able to. So Yaakov was bowing down to him like you do to a king during his time of power. This itself was emboldening Yosef, who's going to have to act with courage against the consent of the many Egyptians who will not allow Yaakov to leave the land of Canaan after his demise. And that's also the idea of a fox. The Gemarah says that a fox is the sly animal. It's pikeach shebachayis. I don't know if you know that a fox is very shrewd. As a predator, in most cases, the animal that it's that it is hunting is unaware of the predator, of the fox, until after it's done. With other animals, that's not the case. At some point, they become aware that somebody's chasing them. It's just too late, and the chase begins. But foxes are very shrewd and very sly, if you're familiar with foxes. This is the idea also, Yaakov was telling Yosef, you're going to have to use your seichel, and in a sophisticated way, get me out of this country. I want to be buried in the land of Israel without Pare feeling that you're undermining his authority and his rule. This is also the remez of a fox. What happens next? After the brothers think he's going to take revenge, and he says, no, I'm not going to take revenge. After the brothers fall and prostrate themselves to him, he comforts them and he speaks to their heart. It says he comforts them. What does it mean he speaks to their heart? When he comforts them, obviously he spoke to them soothing words. Obviously, this teaches us that he told them things that affected their heart. It wasn't just he comforted them. He made sure to speak words that would go into their heart. This is a very interesting interpretation in Gemarah. When you say, when I tell you I comforted somebody, that would mean what? I said words of comfort. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it penetrated your heart. It means that I tried to say good words of comfort. Vayidaber aliba means he got to their heart. Omar, what did he say to them? If 10 flames could not extinguish one flame, do you think one flame can extinguish 10 flames? Meaning, you guys were 10 brothers. All of you tried to extinguish me. You threw me in a pit, and then you sold me into slavery. Remember, 10 brothers were involved in the sale because Reuven was the one who suggested that Yosef is thrown into the pit. And after that, they sold him into slavery, even though Reuven wasn't there during the sale. So 10 flames tried to extinguish one flame, but you did not prevail. So do you think that one flame will be able to extinguish 10 flames? If all your attempts to extinguish my fire, my light, did not work, not only that, not only was I not extinguished, my flame started to shine even brighter and brighter and brighter. I became the second in command to Paro, the prime minister of Egypt, the superpower of the time and the man who saved the world from famine. Not only did you not extinguish my light, on the contrary, you emboldened my light, you made my light increase. Do you think one flame will be able to extinguish 10 flames? Don't worry about it. I will not be able to damage you. Yosef HaTzadik tells them, and this is a fascinating insight that Yosef tells his brothers, which gets to their heart. Why does it get to their heart? What does he tell them here that really affects their heart? You see what he tells them? He uses the word candles. Why candles? Why candles? What's the idea of a candle? The idea, of course, is that the Maharsha says that a soul is compared to a flame. The Pasuk says in Mishlei, chapter 20, Neir Hashem Nishmas Adam. The soul of a human being is a flame of God. Every neshama is a burning flame. Why is it called a flame? Because it's part of the infinite light, and it's one flame that comes from the infinite light and now comes into your body. It's a flame. Storms come and they can extinguish a flame. But our neshama is called a flame, a neir. And the metaphor is exact. Every person has their light that they bring into the world. They are a manifestation of the divine light. But I am my manifestation and you are your manifestation. Every one of us has his or her name. In life, there are many things or people that can extinguish your light. What does it mean, extinguish your light? That your light is now darkened. There's no light anymore in your life. They dull your senses. They cause you melancholy or despair or depression or darkness or uncertainty, and you're not shining anymore. And this is what they tried to do to Yosef. They stripped him from his light, from his dignity, from his beautiful tunic. They threw him into a pit and they sold him as a slave. Yosef says, but nobody can ever extinguish your light. Even 10 flames gang up against you. They can't extinguish your light. You know why? Because it's not your light. It's God's infinite light that is manifested through you. The moment you know that, you know nobody can extinguish your light. Nobody can extinguish your flame. The most ferocious adversary, the worst abuser, and the greatest challenge cannot extinguish your light if you don't allow them to, because your flame, Neir Hashem Nishmas Adam, always burns. It always is radiant. 10 guys ganged up against me. They can try to destroy my light, but you can't. The flame always burns brightly as long as you're aware of it. Even if you're not aware of it, it burns brightly. But if you're not aware of it, it's not manifested consciously in your life. So Yosef says, don't worry. When you have this attitude, you'll understand if 10 couldn't extinguish one will not be able to extinguish 10. And the reason one will not be able to extinguish 10 is because Yosef is really telling them that ultimately everything is in the hands of heaven. And whatever a person tries doing to somebody else, even if it seems so horrible, it's because God is allowing that to happen because the person has a mission. Their light must shine in that place. And here in this little statement, not so little, we have a philosophy of life. Yosef said, you did not sell me. Let me tell you what happened. My light was destined to brighten up Egypt. If I would have remained in Hebron with my father, my light would never come out. My light would be stifled. My light would be repressed. So God sent you as messengers to help my light be manifested in the world. I know you tried to harm me. That's what he tells them. You tried to harm me. But Elikim chashav l'toiva. Because nobody can extinguish somebody else's light. All they can do is help you find your true light. And whatever they do to you, it's only helping you find your true light and brighten the world with that unique light that all of these challenges help you find and actualize. Brothers, he says, this is how you have to think about life. This is what sustained me. Now don't think that one flame could extinguish 10 flames. It just can't happen. This, the Gemarah says, spoke to their hearts. This resonated with them. It's not only he comforted them, Vayidaber al libam, he penetrated their heart. This is what Yosef says. Let's take some questions. 845-777-4747. The neck connects the head and the brain to the body. The Beis HaMikdash connects the Ruchnius world to the Gashmius world. Also, if the neck is severed, it's all over. Yes. The problems between the brothers came about because of jealousy. But the jealousy was triggered by Yaakov, who gave only Yosef the colored garment. Good question. I'm going to ask you to listen to the class of last Thursday and Friday where we addressed that. As my mouth speaks, so my heart feels. That's what the brothers did when they spoke to Yosef. Their words and actions matched what was in their hearts. Yes, Rashi says in Vayeshev they couldn't speak peacefully to him, and that also shows their authenticity, that they did not lie. Whatever they believed inside, they expressed. They did not, they carried their soul on their sleeve. They were not double-faced. We also learned about Esther, that when she was accusing Haman of being a Jew hater, she started to point to Achashverosh, and the Malach had to push away her hand because, again, her truthfulness was coming out. So these were true people. They were very true people, and they were not double-faced. And then when they had an issue with Yosef, they told it to him in his face. Okay, Rabbi Sai, my dear friends, we're going to conclude here. We're going to learn Be'ezer Hashem tomorrow as well. It behooves me now to take this opportunity to thank everybody for coming. These are chaotic times, to say it mildly, but one of our weapons as Jews, maybe our greatest weapon, is the Torah. So we dedicate all of these classes to all of our brothers and sisters who need a complete and speedy recovery. May God grant them a refuah shlema, a refuah kreva, to them, to all of the Jewish people the world over, and to all good people the world over. I love you and I bless you and wish you a very beautiful day. May it be a day of good news, of happy news, and may all of us and all of you please stay healthy and stay quarantined. It's very, very important. Needless to say, but I think unfortunately it still needs to be said because of some cluelessness that still reigns. Einstein said two things are infinite: the universe and stupidity. And I am not sure about the former. I never knew if Einstein was right, but I think now I have seen that Albert Einstein was once again proven right, just as he was proven right about the black hole. So it is very surprising, but that's the fact. And it's very important for people to act as leaders and do what they have to do at such a moment of crisis. I wish you all the blessings today. Tomorrow morning, 7:45, we'll have a meditation with Rabbi Moshe Zev Lamb, 7:45. And then 8 o'clock, we will continue the Maimer about Pesach. And then following that, we'll have our Shir Gemarah. That's tomorrow morning. In the meantime, I wish you a beautiful day. I miss you all. Bracha v'atzlacha. Stay healthy.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.